Welcome to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast, where we seek to further equip you for the work of ministry by discussing a variety of biblical, theological, and practical topics. Stick around until the end of the episode to learn how you can submit a question for us to answer on the podcast.
Welcome back to the whatever.
Pastors Podcast.
Pastors Podcast.
Is that like the official title? Because I was, just so you know, I was on a podcast yesterday, and
Oh, really?
yeah, a very famous podcast. So they were
dropping
asking what our name is, and Stephen Lewis, who was also on this podcast yesterday, said just Kerrville Bible. They just call it Kerrville Bible Church, and the other guy said, "Well, that's original." And then I said, "No, it's called the Pastors Podcast." So is that
Right.
the official name, or is it KBC Pastors Podcast? What are we? Who are we?
I don't know. I always say Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast.
Okay, you do the full title.
Yeah, but when you send it out, doesn't it say KBC Pastors Podcast?
The thumbnail does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a nice little logo, with the microphone, KBC Pastors Podcast. But I just didn't know what we were called.
Yeah. Well,
when people call me.
This
when
is
people
like a
wanna know.
sub podcast of the church. There's the sermons, and then there's this. But they're all on the same, they're all on the
Feed.
same account,
Yeah.
much to the chagrin of some people that we know.
But then,
They would
want
like
them-
us to
they want them
separate.
Oh, they
separated.
want it separate.
so the point is that we offer all kinds of resources.
Yeah, we're like your one-stop shop for theological enlightenment.
That's right.
So
Resource Center.
we are a resource center for your walk with the Lord. So you're welcome. No, I was just,
Well, go ahead.
I was just distracted by our pre-roll discussion when I hit record, and so I just completely lost what I was going to say.
Yeah, where you were, who you
I
were.
was like, all of a
you're
sudden,
doing.
I just don't want to be here anymore.
Me neither. Like, yeah.
Let's just go.
I'm not even sure I
Let's
can
go
eat
to
lunch after this. Like, golly.
But the demand is high because we had a long break and then we came back and then we had another break.
Yeah.
So it's quiet for the moment
Yeah.
overhead, and we're back with a quiet building apparently, and we can have a successful whatever this is.
Podcast.
Podcast.
We had a double episode 2 weeks ago, so
Right.
it was a long one, and
It was. We were right at a solid hour, weren't we?
It was a solid hour. I thought it was a good episode, and well received too.
The MacArthur one
a
was
lot
well received.
A lot
All right.
of views on it. So, so if we're chasing those stats,
Always.
then
It's a
this one's
competition.
not
Life is a
gonna.
competition.
This one's not gonna be the one that we.
I don't know. Might be
That's going to
surprised.
go down. It's not going to be in our top 10 list
Might be surprised.
for when we celebrate 300 episodes. But what we're talking about today is teaching our kids about alcohol. We had a question come in from one of our listeners, and they want to know how to teach kids about alcohol so they don't see it as some shiny object. If you have it around, it could seem like a novelty that the kids get to have someday, but if you never have it around, then it's something the kids want because they haven't had it around. So how do you balance that, and what's our pastoral take on parenting our children in this very kind of specific way? Before we do that, I pulled some stats off from there's a Gallup poll recently, actually, that says a record low 54% of Americans say they consume alcohol. So there is
It's been on the decline. Yeah.
alcohol use and sales have been on a steep decline, probably for the past 20, almost 30 years.
Wow. Surprising.
I didn't realize that
Yeah.
long, yeah.
So a lot of it is there's a lot more people, maybe from the medical community, coming out and saying that even casual alcohol use is detrimental from a health standpoint. It's really, really taxing on the liver, and the liver is such a vital part of our whole life, that it controls so much of our body's detoxing system. So
Right.
when you tax that, you're basically poisoning yourself.
I wonder if that article or if that findings goes on to explain why it might be. So I've got a cynical side and then maybe a positive side. Maybe the positive side is just the increased interest in health in general in our country, exercise, health, diet. That's in that same time frame, right? Just think of all the stuff, the organic food, the gluten-free, the this, the that's just come about in the last 10 to 20 years that used to not be there, right? It's hard to even plan big group events anymore around meals because everybody's got their specific things, that comes into play. So I wonder if that's part of it, just the overall interest in health. My cynical side says nothing's changed. It's just been replaced with prescription drugs and marijuana. We just went to Maine. We didn't see any liquor stores, but there's a marijuana store on every other corner, it seemed like. And places like Maine and Colorado and some
I forget how many. I think 20
states
now have, somewhere around that number, have now, approved, marijuana use.
Yeah, so to see the increase in marijuana use would be a nice parallel to that. Yeah. A decrease in alcohol use, but what's the increase in
And we also know in that same time frame that the use of prescription drugs, psychotropic prescription drugs that graph is a steep incline for all sorts of these mental quote unquote mental illness ailments. We also know that mixing alcohol with those drugs is very, very dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I'm just wondering because the percentage of people who 30 years ago were not on any kind of prescription drug like that and now that's an astronomical increase, right? So I don't know. It'd be interesting to know the whys and wherefores.
The fentanyl crisis, that is often talked about, and it's hard to know how to assess statistics like that.
Right. There seem to be no less commercials for alcohol.
Yeah.
As far as my sports viewing, it seems to be just as prevalent as it always has been, but that could be.
Here's a little slight indicator, and we're going to get into this talk about in our homes and all that. So I'll drink non-alcoholic beers, right? And so when I first had non-alcoholic beers, it was basically O'Doul's. Even, I don't know if y'all remember back when I was a teenager, they had near beer. It was called near beer. I begged my mom to buy a near beer. Mom, can I try a near beer? Boy, it was bad. It's as bad as you think it would be, right? But now,
is that like a cousin of root beer?
Yeah, no. So back, let's say, I don't know, it's been over 20 years since I've drank, and so when I would have a non-alcoholic beer, it would be an O'Doul's, right? Well, now if you go to H-E-B in their non-alcoholic beer section, there are 30 varieties, craft beer, all kinds of stuff. Interesting. So they've picked up on, the companies. So Coors makes Coors, but they make the non-alcoholic. Heineken makes Heineken, but they make the non. You know what I mean? So it's like the companies. There's some kind of a shift into maybe what you're saying, your non-cynical side, Chris, of people trying to get healthier, trying to be healthier. Possibly. There's a big increase. So there's got to be a market for them to be doing that.
I've seen Heineken commercials in the workplace where they're drinking those in the workplace, and the old boss guy comes in and thinks they're drinking, and they're like, no, it's whatever.
So it's interesting.
Go watch a lot of commercials, I guess.
That's what happens when you watch a lot of
sports. There's a lot
of live sports. Yeah, I wonder too if there is also a decline in socializing. Okay. There's a since I guess maybe since the rise of the iPhone and our these personal false connection devices that we all carry in our pockets, that you get the kind of the dopamine hit from fellowship and connection without the actual being with
interpersonal relationships. Right. Yeah, barbecues in the backyard, the swim pool.
I think there are fewer of those happening than there used to be, and that was social drinking was a major part of that experience.
Could be.
So anyway, all right. Well, we've exhausted that one. So all right. So let's talk about the parenting issue around alcohol. You guys have had various in our pre-roll discussion, none of you have alcohol in your house.
Not true.
No?
Yeah, we have alcohol in our house.
Okay. But you don't let... Okay.
So,
all right, this is news.
So I don't drink, but we have alcohol.
You don't
in our
drink,
house.
okay.
Yeah, we will have everybody else. No, Katie will enjoy a glass of wine, yes.
Okay.
So it is in our house.
Okay. But Scott and Chris, you both said you have it. You don't have it in the house. You don't drink. None of the three of you do. I will occasionally. I told the doctor, I went and saw a new doctor last week, and they said, how often do you drink alcohol? I was like, less than occasionally. So they're like, okay, so never. I was like, well, not never, but not occasionally either. There's something in between.
Another box.
Seldom. But I'm not what you'd call a teetotaler. I'm not against it. And the Bible's not against it either. But so how do we talk to our kids about it? How have you talked to your kids about it so that it doesn't become some sort of novelty or, like this question asked us, some shiny object that I just can't wait to try that someday when I'm old enough?
Well, I would say you have, because I've seen this, you have people who have taken the route of no alcohol in the house, and the kids don't experience alcohol at all, and when they leave the home, fly off the handle and go crazy, right? You see that? You see same family, no alcohol in the house, kid leaves the home, they too do not. Maybe they try it once or twice, but it's not something they stay accustomed to how they were raised, right? And then you see the opposite. You see people who have alcohol in the home and kids who it never becomes an issue. They maybe drank a few times when it was legal and never did anything else. And then you see the same thing. People who it was in the home and go off and then go crazy, so it would be interesting. I don't know if we could ever find a statistic that would say if you do not have alcohol in the home, it's kind of like raise your kid in the way he should go and he'll never depart from it, right? Is there a statistic of if you didn't, there's a better chance of them not? I mean, possibly.
Some
we
sort
don't
of
know.
predictable.
Yeah, exactly. But I'd say you see all four of those scenarios. Yeah. I've seen that.
I mean, it's like there's no predictable outcomes
necessarily, right?
And
if the Bible forbid it, as we're going to discuss, that's an issue that we would have to take up, right, as a family. That it's forbidden, so we can't do it. But we know that that's not what the Bible says. So.
Right. Yeah. How have you talked to your kids about
it was. We never had massive discussions about alcohol, as our kids were growing up. As they got older, we had discussions, but it was just sort of a given that, we don't have alcohol in the house. We don't, it wasn't like our kids were like, Mom, Dad, when are you going to let us, drink a beer, those kind of discussions never came up. But when we did have discussions about it, and we did as our kids grew older, we laid down what the Bible says. I mean, the Bible does not forbid drinking alcohol. What it forbids is drunkenness. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there are places in the Old Testament where wine and even strong drink is said to be a blessing. Now, strong drink. The other thing we have to understand is that what constituted alcohol in biblical times is not what constitutes alcohol in the present. Because of the invention of the still and the Middle Ages, they've been able to increase the degree of alcohol that's actually present within all forms of alcohol, pretty much. And so wine in the Bible was diluted. The typical dilution was 3 parts water and 1 part wine. So the wine we drink today is undiluted. That just simply wasn't the case in the Bible, except for maybe how some interpret strong drink, maybe undiluted wine, or other forms of alcohol. So, so that's important to understand some of that historical context when the Bible speaks about alcohol.
Would we be able to say as an extrapolation that alcohol today is 3, 4, 5 times as strong as,
at the very least,
at the least,
yeah,
as biblical times?
Yeah. So alcohol, typically wine would have had about 3% alcohol in biblical times, and now it can be 10 to 12%.
Okay.
And hard alcohol,
4 to 5 times.
whiskeys and things like that can be 30 to 40%, and even I suppose even more than that.
Right.
And that was totally unheard of in biblical times. So you didn't have the ability to make alcohol that had that much alcohol content,
Right.
and until the Middle Ages when the still was first invented.
You touched on something that was our experience. I don't think this is going to be a topic until your kids are probably teenagers. At least that was our experience. It wasn't even something that they're even aware of that much. It really starts coming into discussion in the teenage years, and that's when the kids start asking, why do you not? Why do you, or why do you not? I saw this at so-and-so's house. That's where it's going to start coming into the parenting discussion. I would say for us, we didn't, and mostly because of our pre-Christ life, Kim and I both. And so we just saw so many dangers of it. I came out of 5 years of drinking. Every time I drank was to get drunk. Lost count of how many times that was definitely on a path of alcoholism because it was never in moderation. I never, ever just drank socially and did not get drunk. Mm-hmm. And so doing that in an increasing way for 5 years, started at age 15, stopped when I got saved at age 20. Of course, the 18 to 20 was way more because I was out of the house and the more freedom and all of that. And so as soon as I was saved, I was like, the reason I was doing that went away. I never liked the taste of it. And so salvation and Jesus, and it sounds cliche, and the Holy Spirit, it basically solved what I was trying to get out of drinking. And so there was just no desire for it anymore. It wasn't even like I had to struggle or fight or like, I don't want to do this. It was just the desire was completely gone. And from that day on, just a path of abstinence. I've tasted a couple of things here and there, but never drank even a full glass of wine or a beer. It's like, I don't want it. It's too sweet, or it tastes gross, or it's just wasted calories, or just whatever. I just don't want it. So I explained all this to my kids, as time, when they were old enough to understand that. And they very readily accepted that. There was never any pushback in the home. I would say most of our discussions with our boys have been since they've left the home. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of ours have too. Yeah.
And they both drink socially, and they have it in their house. And I've had my fatherly times of admonishment and count. They both say they've never been drunk, and I believe them. But I've had my time of just the warning, like your sermon talks about, just the time of warning about this very, very dangerous habit, mm-hmm. because of the content, one, and what I've shared with my boys, like, you just don't know what's going to happen in life, and you don't know how hard life can become. And my concern for you is that if you develop any kind of habit of, I need this to relax, I need this to wind down, I need this for what, if you develop any kind of habit without ever getting drunk, mm-hmm. then the fear I have for you is when the bottom falls out of your life, what are you going to turn to? Are you mm-hmm. going to need this thing? And other people can do the same.
It can be true of anything.
It can be true of anything.
Yeah.
It can be true of food. It can be true of sweets. It can be true of ice cream. There's any number of things you could put into that. But those things don't have the consequences that drunkenness have.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why the command to not get drunk is very clear, strong in the Bible. I grew up same as you, Chris. I was just 5 years more of it. From age 15 to 25, same thing. Never drank to just because have a beer with some guys. Only drank to get drunk 100% of the time, and so it was actually it was more than 10 years. And so I know. So if I'm sitting with somebody who's trying to make an argument that no, Because here's what I'm going to ask everybody. I mean, as a person who's been on both sides, I think it's fair for me to be able to ask this question: is why? Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you
Mm-hmm.
want to have a glass of wine? You know, and you hear people that maybe drink scotch or a bourbon, and you're like, man, ooh, that like on the rocks, you know, and it tastes. And they'll say this, they'll say, well, it's an acquired taste. Well, if you have to acquire a taste for it, why are you drinking it? Like a good glass of chocolate milk, you don't have to acquire a taste for, man. It just tastes good, you know?
But you drink kombucha, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's an acquired taste.
I don't think so.
It's like,
it tastes great. I really like it. I like it.
Medicinal.
Tastes good. Good for my gut. But
that's what they tell you.
so I know this to be true about alcohol, that at best it's neutral. That's at best. Mm-hmm. It's neutral. That's the very best it can be, is it's neutral. Mm-hmm. And then anything from the best of it being neutral is it can be bad. Because I know what, and then where are you in the intoxication scale? Like how much you weigh, what drink you're actually drinking, you know, a light beer versus a strong beer versus wine versus a spirit, right? And so I know at best it's neutral, and I know for sure unequivocally what alcohol does to you. Makes you think things you wouldn't think, makes you look at things you wouldn't look at, and makes you say things you wouldn't say, and it makes you do things you wouldn't do when you get to the point of intoxication. So how do you regulate where you're at the intoxication level, right? And so that's 100%. And I'm not, like I said, in our home, like we have wine in our home. So I don't drink it, but we have it. So I'm not a teetotaler and saying complete abstinence. But I know that what you're saying, Chris, is there is a danger. You're saying to your kids, look, I know you haven't, but just explore and be open to what are the dangers, because at best it's neutral.
Yeah.
We don't need it for medicinal purposes anymore. We can't. People say, well, I use it for my heart. Drink pomegranate juice. Equivalent benefits to your heart and your blood. Right, and
we don't need it to ppurify our water, like places all over the country, all over the world, even today. So
right. So it's not, and I'm not that I don't want to come off as a teetotaler, because I think there is a freedom in it. I think there is there's a place for it, and I think that I'm not saying that, and I'm around it. I've been around it as a non-drinker for 20 years, and that doesn't bother me. I don't have a problem with it, with people who are followers of Christ, who drink responsibly, have a glass of wine, whatever, right? I'm not saying that, but I just want to ask the question, why?
Yeah.
And then they have to explain and unpack that.
You said the word danger, and this would be the other comment I would make about talking to our kids, and that's drunk driving, because a buzz is drunk driving, and it takes so very little to get to that level where you could potentially be 0.08, whatever. I think that's Texas limit, right? Really, 2 beers within an hour for most people, you're very dangerously close to 0.08. And I've known people that have gotten surprise DUIs that did not think they were drunk.
Yeah.
They thought they were fine. They were driving fine. They were reacting fine. They thought.
Yeah.
Cop notices something, pulls them over, breathalyzer, blood test, whatever. It's a DUI. And now all of a sudden, life-changing, especially for someone that's underage, especially for somebody that's young and your insurance is already through the roof. But if let's say you're a middle-aged man, you're 45 and you get a DUI, I mean, you're looking at $10,000 in a blink of an eye at least, you know. It's going to cost you a lot. It's going to be a major stressor. So I think that's a very important thing, because the Bible doesn't really talk about this. It just outlaws drunkenness, but we know that drunkenness is on a spectrum. It's not a clear cut, I'm sober, I'm drunk. It's a process to get there, and it's a spectrum. And so it becomes very, I think, personal to a person that does drink socially or drinks as a Christian, to be very sober-minded and accurate as to what is my limit. And I would argue that if you are going to drink, and I think I've said this to my kids, and if you're going to, yes, there is liberty, and if you are going to do that, recognize that it's how strong it is, and probably one within an hour's time frame might be a good rule of thumb as to what is tolerable for the believer. one glass of wine within the hour, one beer within the hour. I mean, I don't know. I got a whole different opinion when we start talking about whiskey and stuff. That stuff, it's just like you can run car engines off of it. You know, I mean, it's like got a whole different opinion on some of that. But anyway, I think that's something to factor into this, something you need to communicate to your kids when you're talking about the dangers.
And then, and so Scott had preached a sermon. Was this back at your old church?
Yes.
Yeah. And then clearly the sin against causing your brother to stumble, what does that look like, right? What does that mean? And which I hope we talk about.
Well, and that's
how that can be unpacked.
That was, my sermon on this subject, which was from Ephesians 5:8. Don't get drunk with wine, but be filled by the Spirit. What are good reasons to abstain from alcohol? And one of them is to prevent others from stumbling, to be a stumbling block to others. And so for me personally, and for our home, because I was a pastor throughout much of the life of my family, I felt as a pastor, it's best for me to take the high road and abstain so as not to ever be a cause of stumbling to anyone in my church. If anyone knew that I drank, would that be a source of stumbling for them? For the weaker brother who maybe had a far more, weak conscience when it came to these matters. And so, and Paul says, if food, 1 Corinthians 8:13, he says, if food causes my brother to stumble, I will never eat again, so that I will not cause my brother to stumble. And you could substitute drink in there, and Paul does in there. He says it's good not to eat, Romans 14:20, it's good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble. And then in 1 Corinthians 10, he says, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. And so Paul is saying, yes, there is liberty. There's freedom. I can eat whatever. I can eat, meat sacrificed to idols. But if it's going to cause my brother to stumble because I'm doing that, then I need to, sacrifice my freedom for the sake of the good of my brother.
Right.
And so I think there's a strong argument that can be made, particularly for people in leadership, that you don't present a cause of stumbling for others.
Because they could see you. You have freedom. You have freedom to drink. But if I, as a weaker brother, see, hey, Scott's having a beer, man, that must mean it's okay, and I'm gonna have a beer too. But I don't have the self-control that you have, and I have 4 beers, right, and I'm drunk, and then the next day I do it again because I'm like, well, Scott had beer, I can do it, and then all of a sudden I'm not just drunk, I'm a drunk. And so I think what Paul's saying in that passage about all things are lawful, but not all things edify, is what Murray said, that at best, alcohol is neutral. There's really no upside to it.
This is where my kids would push back, especially my older son who loves to debate all things.
Right. Come on.
He would say, Dad, you're missing social opportunities with people. You're missing hospitality opportunities. You're missing the ability to have people, not the effect of alcohol, but just the removal of the awkwardness of somebody's not drinking. Now everybody's like, whatever. And he would probably, I don't know how far he would push this, but he would probably argue that there are social benefits / relational benefits / even gospel benefits potentially that you could be missing out on.
Yeah, I heard somebody. I can't remember if it was a serious talk or if it was a comedian talking about how alcohol is the only drug that you have to justify not using. And that's what that reminds me of. Yeah. That alcohol is a drug that you have to justify not using. Right. Why don't you drink? why do I have to explain to you why I don't drink?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's sort of an interesting argument. I remember my college years when I was first really growing in my faith and was wrestling with these kinds of issues then. In my circles, in as an architecture student where you're thrown together with guys, a lot. You spend a lot of time with people in this, what we call the studio, where we're working on projects and we're there for days and days at a time trying to finish up projects. So you're with each other a lot. And in these kind of social environments, I'm trying to befriend people who aren't believers so that I can have opportunities to share the gospel. But they knew there was something different about me, and that when they came together, they would invite me to drink a beer and I'd say no. And, it sort of felt awkward at first, but when they realized that I maintained a particular standard, they actually gained a degree of respect for me.
Right.
That I think might not have come otherwise if I would just like going along with the crowd, so to speak.
Yeah.
And and so there's an opposing argument.
That's right.
To
There's
that
a
as well.
Here's how
I
I think Caleb would present it, or I'm guessing he hadn't said this, but this would be my guess. It would be like going on a mission trip and not eating the food put in front of you, and how you potentially are offending your host or offending the people around you, or what you're not joining in. I think he would, and we don't have this in my social circles. But I think the argument would be something like that, where you're trained when you go on mission trips, you better eat what they put in front of you, or at least act like you're eating it or something. It's like it's almost offensive not to, and I think in some cultural settings, I've been in some of these settings, it is offensive to the host and to the person offering when you decline.
Yeah.
I have definitely been there, and I've been the awkward person who is the only one in the room not drinking, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. I think it makes the other people feel uncomfortable. So my general take is, if that's going to be present, I'm probably not going to be there if it's a social thing.
Well, yeah. And I mentioned even in my sermon that we've been referencing that, I spent a semester in Italy when I was in college. Right. And like I said in the sermon, wine is like a staple, in Italy. And you go to any restaurant, they bring a carafe of wine to your table, just like today they would bring water to your table. In the University of Florence where I studied, they had the student lunch hour, and we would join there, and they'd bring wine. It was there. It was just so much a part of their culture. Nobody ever thought twice about it. But I don't think that's quite the same in America. And I think there's more of a stigma connected to alcohol, and for a whole variety of reasons, cultural and sociological reasons. But,
I think it depends on which pocket of culture you're in.
That's right.
I think there's tons of places in America where there's no stigma at all.
Yeah. That's
none whatsoever.
Yes, you're right.
It just depends on the setting and the culture and where the people are coming from. I mean, I'll give you for instance. I got some Presbyterian pastor buddies, and they don't hesitate to drink beer. And I was at a pastor's conference and went out to eat with 3 other guys, and they all ordered a big, tall, dark glass of beer. And I was like, no. I'm like, really? I'm at a pastor's conference.
On my sabbatical,
no stigma at all.
On my sabbatical, I went to a Presbyterian church, and they serve communion, and they use real wine. I know, because I know the taste of real wine.
Right.
And so yeah, you're correct.
I think it's here. I think it just depends on your church subculture. A lot of it depends on your church subculture and how conservative your church subculture is. Our church and my son's church, we believe alike, but the cultures are so incredibly different. They do a men's thing where they call it toke. What do they call it? Toke and smoke. And it's a bunch of guys get together and they smoke cigars and talk and have fellowship. They're like old Charles Spurgeons, sitting around talking about the Bible. And that's the thing the church actually sponsors and announces, right? And so think of that culture to KBC culture, right? And so it just they're in Austin, we're in Kerrville. I don't know. I think there's just different cultures.
So, with all that in mind, I think you just have to use wisdom in your particular context, and you don't bind someone else's conscience, with your view. I think that's the other part of the issue is there's freedom, but you also don't bind other people's conscience. Oh, well, how come you don't do this, and shame people for not taking a particular position. I think you have to be very careful
on both
with
sides.
that. On both sides,
right?
That's correct.
It's a group of Christian men in a culture like your son's church who have really taken the liberty to have a drink in a social setting, and then someone like you show up and you don't. How they treat you is the very same thing. Just like us treating someone who does drink, if we were to be looked down on, you can't do that, right? And so it's both sides, and I think both sides have to be fair to that.
That's exactly right.
Both sides have to be fair to that. That other side that is saying, "Oh no, there's freedom in this," they have to take into account what Paul's saying, because Paul's saying, meat sacrificed to an idol is just meat, because there's no such thing as an idol. And idols have no power. They're not divine. There's only one true God. But I will forgo eating meat ever again for the sake of the person who feels like it's wrong to do. That's what he's saying. It's the weaker Christian, not the weaker Christian who is struggling with eating food sacrificed to idol. He's saying, we can't do it. Don't you guys know this is a sin? This is bad. And he's telling the more mature brother that might be walking with them, hey, because the more mature brother's like, hey, this is just meat. Like Paul would say, he goes, but we can't cause this guy to stumble, for the sake of conscience. And so I think both sides have to be fair. Yeah. It's not just one side or the other,
Yeah. And we also want to be careful about assuming that someone who has a strong conscience with regard to, for example, abstinence, that we don't assume, they don't drink, so they must be the weaker brother. That may not be their reason for having developed a particular conscience or a particular standard. People have various convictions, for various reasons, and we need to respect those convictions. And so I think there's different issues that come into play when you're discussing this.
Right. If you bring it back to the parenting question, I think that's I love that word. I think that's an important part of this. I think it's going to be based on the parent's conviction. What do I tell my kids? Well, I'm going to teach them the Bible. I'm going to teach them what their age appropriate can handle, but it's going to be based on my convictions and why do I have those convictions. And I think that's critical in this whole thing, because the last thing you want to do is teach your children hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to talk about how are we going to discuss this, and even like in your house, there's a difference in it. That's very close to our house. We don't really ever have it in the house much. Occasionally there might be something. Kim she'd be in your category between never and occasional. Yeah. This very rare thing, maybe 2 or 3 times a year kind of thing. And there might be some stuff in the house used for cooking purposes, and so Kim and I are a little bit different. We're close, but we're not identical on this. And so I think the key is I'm communicating openly with my children based on my own convictions and understanding, which is going to come in, it's going to bring in my experience. It's going to bring in my past, how I was raised, what I witnessed as a child, what I did before I was converted. I think all that stuff is part of the discussion, so that when your kids make their own decision, which they're going to do.
That's right. They're going to
They're going to make their own decision. Right. They've got all of the data that they need, at least from your vantage point, as to why you landed where you landed.
100%. As a parent, isn't that parenting? That's parenting. Yeah, we for the old school is, when your parent tells you what to do, and the kid asks why, and you don't ask why, you just do because I told you to, right? Well, there is I think good parenting includes answering the why. Well, here's why. Here's why, knowing full well that you're going to be 21 one day and you're going to be able to make your own decisions. But here's why I haven't. Here's why we haven't. Here's why we stand in this position helps helps them have the freedom versus like a dogmatic, iron-fisted,
Right.
we don't, and then, cross the line to say it's a sin. That it's a sin. Now you've crossed
now you've crossed into legalism.
That's right.
And legalism tends to like push your children to say, they're going to be legalistic about it. That often pushes kids into rebellion.
Yeah.
So we don't want to demonize it. But on the other side, we also don't want to glorify it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
which goes back to the neutral question.
It's neutral, and the kids. There's no hard and fast predictor of how the kids are going to respond anyway.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, what's going to keep them from drunkenness is salvation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, what's going to keep them from going off the rails in any sin, losing self-control in any sin, is the Spirit of God and
salvation.
And salvation.
Being filled with the Spirit.
Exactly.
Don't be drunk with wine, which is dissipation, but be filled with the Spirit. Yeah. Which the Spirit comes through the Word, and the Spirit reveals the Word. So,
yeah.
And He satisfies, right? He satisfies.
Yeah.
Nobody
needs alcohol. We don't need it. Nobody needs it.
Right. I don't know. I wonder I mean, just thinking back, if we could have or should have done anything any different, there might be some wisdom in it's around occasionally. They see it. I mean, there might be something you can do from a wisdom standpoint that alleviates the shiny object part of this.
Yeah. And that's why I think just transparency.
Yeah.
Genuineness within the family discussion. Right. I think that's just key, right? It's a relationship. It's all those things. And at the end of the day, they're still going to make their own decision. That's what I know to be true, given a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old.
Right.
And
they're going to make that decision before they're 21.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
They're going to be around it. They're going to have opportunity. They're going to be exposed at 15, 16, 17. They're going to have the opportunity to drink long before they can legally drink. Yeah. And so, again, we've got to be equipping them for the dangers and how this can absolutely undo your life if you oh my goodness, you can the worst case scenario changes your life forever.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. So there's a reason why there's a good legal age of 21. I think brains are still developing, driving skills are developing, all those things, and major decisions are still happening. And I mean, I've known young people that Christian homes, and they got caught with the stuff at school, public school. They're expelled. They're in juvie. I mean, there's a lot of bad consequences.
Well, I mean,
that are out there.
Kill someone.
That's the worst.
You kill someone, and I mean, wow.
And you're scarred forever.
Yeah. And so many levels.
Yeah. Okay.
That was fun.
That was
fun. Thanks, Toby.
Self-flagellation would have been better.
That was a whole barrel of laughs.
It's fun that
it's we can try that. We can try self-flagellation next week.
That'll be my subject next week. Self-flagellation. Yeah. Asceticism.
The only thing that's fun is that it's over.
Yeah. Well, how about we pray?
Okay.
Tie a bow on this. Father in heaven, Lord, thank you for this discussion, as hard as it was. And I pray that it benefits our hearers, whether they're parenting or not. And Lord, there's biblical evidence that you give alcohol and you give wine as a sign of blessing and a sign of your favor. But like many of your blessings, we shouldn't love the blessing, but our ultimate aim is to love the blesser, to love the giver of all good gifts. And so I pray that our eyes would be fixed on you, that we would trace the sunbeams to the source of the light, and teach our kids, our grandkids, nieces and nephews to respect this blessing, to use it with fear and respect, and not abuse it, and not and really not desire it, but to desire you and to hold these things loosely. But pray that this discussion is a blessing to our hearers, and we look forward to being together again. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for listening to the Kerrville Bible Church Pastors Podcast. We want to be a resource for you and answer the questions that are on your mind. Please send them to us via email at questions@kerrvillebiblechurch.org or call or text us at 830-321-0349.